We're now in the transition period from one presidency to the next in the United States. It's a time when people are evaluating presidential appointees and potential cabinet members, thinking about the agenda and what it will be going forward. And of course, we'll be heading in about a month into the phase just before the inauguration of the next president. President-elect Trump will take office in under 50 days now. You played a very important role in President George W. Bush's transition, as you did in his White House and his administration. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the best way to use a presidential transition, one that's unusual. Yours was unusual. This is an unusual one. To use one in a way that's most effective, really for helping to lead the country as well as possible after you're inaugurated.
Well, I think the transition period is an important time in which you can begin sending signals. As you mentioned, ours was very truncated. It came after the Florida recount, which was a very contentious time. And so we felt it was important to send a signal of bringing the country together. We thought in making our cabinet choices, in preparing to govern, President Bush believed that he should govern in a way that based on his campaign. So he tried to make throughout the transition, statements that would lead people to understand what his priorities would be based on what he had said during the campaign. I think what we are seeing right now from President-elect Trump are a couple of interesting signals. One of the things I think you can say is that, at least in his initial appointments, many of them seem to be designed for him to be able to work effectively with Congress. And I think that should be reassuring to a country that I think is concerned by what they've seen, the inability of Congress, the dysfunction between the White House and the Congress that we've witnessed over recent years. And what I mean by that is, so for example, the appointment of Reince Priebus as the White House Chief of Staff. He is close to Speaker Ryan. A number of other members of Congress, of the military community with whom with whom members of Congress are familiar, have been appointed to some of those key positions. A member of Congress appointed as the Secretary of Health and Human Service. And so I think, whether intentionally or not, one of the signals that President-elect Trump is sending is that he intends to work with Congress to try to advance an agenda. It's because he is trying to make so many personnel appointments. I think we've heard a little less from him about what his priorities will be, specifically in the early months of his administration. Obviously, he made a lot of statements over the course of the campaign, so I think people are listening to hear, what will those priorities be? How quickly will he move on things like, for example, trying to repeal and or replace Obamacare? I don't think we really know that yet. We know that he appointed someone who's been highly critical of the legislation and who is also very knowledgeable about healthcare policy. And that signals to me that he intends to move ahead with that campaign promise and to try to work to get action on that. The next moment at which I think, other than these personnel appointments that we'll get a signal from the president-elect, is with his inaugural speech, at which he will probably try to set a vision for where he wants to lead the country, what his it's not a legislative speech, it's much more of an inspirational speech. But he could also do a series of policy announcements at different points along the way to send signals. He talked about a deregulation agenda. He talked about health care. He talked about immigration. He talked, there are he talked about bringing jobs to America, and there's already been an announcement that Carrier perhaps is keeping some jobs in the state of Indiana. It appears in reaction to some of the messages that came out from the election and from the electorate in expressing its concern about American jobs moving overseas. And so I think what we'll see next is a series of signals about what might be the timing of those initiatives, when might they take place, which ones will be the priorities. There's a lot of excitement, I understand, on Capitol Hill right now. I think a lot of the Republican leadership, Speaker Ryan, Chairman Brady, have been working hard on a lot of policy initiatives on what they called, I think, the better way. And they have, I hope, optimism that some of those policy initiatives we'll have the opportunity to move forward now with an administration that seems more in line with the goals and priorities of the Congress.
Karen, thanks. This has been a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to being able to do it again soon with you. And thank you very much for making time for all of this.
Thanks very much, Don. Great talking with you.